The summary for Urban Policymakers is really an attempt to distill a broad body of science in a way that I think makes it more accessible for people working in urban governance, and that can be city officials, but not just city officials, also civil society, and even people in national and regional governments who are focused on cities. So for me, anyway, it's a crucial piece of distillation. The SUP for me speaks to the two sides of the same coin. The first is obviously that cities aggregate risk. A lot of what we talk about in the climate change context manifests at the local scale and in cities themselves, on urban systems. That can be combinations of flooding, heat stress, food shortages, energy outages, all the things that we talk about in quite conceptual global terms in our global climate reports really hit home and stack up upon each other within cities. And of course, this is a challenge for cities. But the reciprocal side of the same conversation and the same piece of research, I think, is that cities are arenas of action. And actually, I would argue, essential arenas of climate action for our global objectives and our global challenges. So I don't think it's possible to have a chance of achieving the pace and the scale that we talk about when it comes to global climate responses, unless we are very focused on what's going on in cities. And that's for a number of reasons. The first is that, as I've already said, city officials tend to be comprised of doers. These are action people, action-oriented people, and they are focused on exactly some of the responses that we need. Cities aggregate capital and innovation, and just by virtue of the fact that they aggregate people. And then this is central to my work, that in large parts of the world, particularly the low and middle income countries, urbanization is an ongoing megatrend and is going to play out over exactly the same timescales, i.e. up until 2050, that the climate crisis is going to play out. And so linking this urbanization megatrend with what we do and how we respond to climate in cities, for me, is non-negotiable. Chapter 5 of the special report on 1.5 degrees of warming was very clear that to achieve the pace and scale of decarbonization and climate change adaptation, we have to link our climate responses to the Sustainable Development Goals. That, for me, makes perfect sense. You cannot convince someone that greenhouse gases in 2040 are important if they don't know how they're going to feed their child tonight. And so those need to be one and the same problem, the same solution to different problems. And this brings development and the aspirations of people in low and middle income countries and poor people, even in affluent countries, into the center frame of the equation. Right? And so in my slightly stylized thinking, you cannot do the climate response unless you do the SDGs. You cannot do the SDGs unless you take Africa very seriously in ways that haven't been manifest up until now. Africa's been something of an afterthought in the way resources, capital has been allocated. And you cannot take Africa seriously unless you take its rapidly evolving cities very seriously. And for me, that's the arc that links African cities back to the global climate response.